Hi, I'm here with Meg Utterback. You just gave this great presentation on the rule of law in China. There tends to be a lot of anxiety over the perception or the application of the rule of law in China. Can you talk a little bit about that and what the perception should be?
So, as I said in the talk this evening, I think the rule of law in China is really, it is at a place that is comfortable for China. In other words, we can't keep applying Western-style rule of law principles to where China is heading. It's more of a hybrid. And so in saying that it's a hybrid, we're looking at really the evolution of the rule of law, Western rule of law being influenced into China, but now China pushing out on the Belt and Road with its own version of that, which is not, it's continually evolving, but it's a Western rule of law, or it's a rule of law rather, coming from China that is not really Western. And so I think we have to recognize that, and I think we have to look back historically at what the Brits did and the Americans, and how rule of law was pushed out through investment and trading, right? And we influence societies by doing that. And what I'm proposing this evening is that people think about, well, what does that mean? If China's rule of law as it is currently is being pushed out on the Belt and Road, what does it mean for the rule of law in those countries? And will it be a Chinese-style rule of law and not what we in the West, have come to term rule of law?
Right.
So it's a little bit different.
And there's a little bit of a discussion about the predictability of Chinese law, the rule of law. Do you think that has to do with what you were just saying, that people just don't understand the system itself?
I think it's cultural in a lot of respects. And I think that it isn't... people need to understand it. I don't think that maybe it's not less predictable is what I'm proposing. I'm proposing maybe we're asking the wrong people, because predictability tends to be what you anticipate and what I anticipate can be very different, right? And that's a product of our culture, our experience, our history. And so what I'm proposing is that possibly that when you bring in other people into the dialogue, that changes how you view predictability. Because predictability says a certain outcome, but how do you measure that outcome? You measure it by certain factors or certain values. And so you have to look at, each person takes into account different things. And what I'm proposing is you can get the same predictability if you add different people into the dialogue.
I have one last question. You talked about the sources or the basis for Chinese law. I thought that was really interesting. You talked about maybe one of the bases being Confucianism. And can you talk about a little bit about that as well?
So I think, what's unique about Chinese rule of law and Chinese law is it has this sort of, in some ways, a long history, but a short history, right? Because the so-called rule of law is a Western concept, probably came in more in the 80s and after Deng Xiaoping started, trying to reform the country. And so what we've seen is, increasingly elaborate and complex and very sophisticated laws being put into place. But there's certainly laws that are influenced by Confucian principles, notions of hierarchy, notions of social harmony and equity. And by way of example, I mentioned the Chinese courts will look to reform a contract that is inequitable, which in most foreign Western jurisdictions, you wouldn't see that. And so that's actually a good thing if it resolves in a more equitable manner. So, as I said, the justices refer to equity and justice being served, not just justice. And I think that's key.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.